We are down to the pointy end of the NBL 25 season. The standings are starting to shake out, and in the SuperCoach world, all finals are down to the final four. It's a must-win week this week, and I am excited for all the basketball coming up. You are with the panel, your official SuperCoach NBL show. As always, I'm your host, Kelsey Brown, and SuperCoach Rookie, and that's why we have two experts with us every single week. Our first chair, JC, James Clement, SuperCoach Wizard. How was your week, JC?
I mean, my week in general was great. Long weekends. It was awesome. By the Moni Murray, just really chill times. My SuperCoach week, however, wasn't that I don't know about you, boy, do you like to jump the gun here, but it feels like the last few weeks as we've gotten to the pointy end of this thing. I finished at top 3% last week, but you're just barely moving in the overall standings, right? Because everybody is sort of having these pretty good weeks. We all have very similar players, of course, so a lot of very similar scores, but overall, my week was amazing because I never, ever doubted Sam Wardenberg. Not once did I ever doubt him or call him Sam Fraudenberg.
He was actually...
I kept the faith and he repaid me because the Ginger Brethren, boom, let's go. And of course, I'd like to shout out former panel, guest as well, Mick Randall for his Nick Stoddard point because he popped off as well. Stoddard was awesome last week. So I had him still on my bench as well from when Mick and I chatted about it. So good weekend overall, but still could have been a little bit better. You
talk about not moving up the standings. Boydie, our second expert today, 1/3 of the basketball blokes, you came in and you told me that you've moved back into 144 overall. You also slipped in that in all of the rivalries between myself and JC and you've won 7-0. So we know who the real expert is here. Welcome in. How was your week?
Thank you. Well, as you said, week didn't start off well because I had PJC starting. So obviously in that first game went down with that injury. So I was kind of a bit upset at that point because I could have started Rob Edwards, could have maybe started Prather instead of him. So that hurt. But then I guess, much like you, JC, I backed in Wardenberg over Prather, and I guess that panned out in the end. So 90 points for Wardenberg was nice. And up to 144th, I was sitting in the low 200s, I think. I had a couple of down weeks, so went back a little bit, but now back in that 155 and plenty of finals wins, which was good.
Yeah, you had plenty of Cairns players as well. JC, I want to ask you, who is on your list at the moment? Who have you got in there? Who's rolling? What are you liking of your team at the moment, despite potentially not loving your week?
Well, Kendrick Davis, obviously. He just rips off another 105. We yelled about this last week. His run home, schedule-wise, the teams that he was playing against is awesome. And he's just proven that time and time again that you can back him in. He's like a lock and load captain for most teams at this point as well, to the point where it's working against you if you try to go for a pod, a point of difference, right? Yep. You just can't not basically have him as your captain. So the other one that I enjoyed this week, having Wardenberg still there was amazing, to the point where I'm like, I can't really trade him out. He's got the double last week. He rips off the 90, really happy with that. And of course, having traded Casey Prather out earlier in the season, I brought him in. And then he repays my faith in him with a stinky second game. And of course, here we are, just going, I can't win with Casey Prather. I love him, he's awesome, but just come on, where's the score? So at the moment, you've still got KD and Trez on this double coming up as well. So they're just rolled gold. They were amazing last week as well. So they've got a really good matchup as well this week, Boydie. The Adelaide, their two games, what is it, Brisbane and then Sem. So those are two teams that you can score a lot of SuperCoach points against, especially Trez in that Brisbane game. Brisbane have got, I might start at centre forward, right? So we'll see what happens. And there's one other sort of dodge bullet, I guess. I had brought in Prather last week, and Josh Bannon was very high on the list, and he missed the second game. So I was kind of like, well, dodge that bullet, and then Prather has a bit of a stinker, and you're like, that sucks. But still, I think the Adelaide guys this week are your sort of big ones, and we'll talk about the most traded ins and outs, but the obvious two candidates for the trading in this week are Bryce and Matt Hurt, and I think that's what will be, borne out.
I mean, if everyone's got the cash for those guys, they're two very expensive players. I think that's why you see Prather's one of those big names to trade outs. Obviously, you only got the two singles to finish off as well. So chasing those doubles this week with Bryce and Matt Hurt, I think that's a wise strategy. If you're in the finals, you've got to do these things, right? Because once if you lose this week, you're out. Yep. So just like last week, actually, funnily enough. But Yeah, so that's some key trades, I guess, coming in. But with keeping a little slight eye on next week when you've only got Cairns and Illawarra on the double for that last week.
That's the really big point, right? So you've got 4 teams on doubles this week, right? You've still got Perth, Sam, Tassie and Adelaide, which is like very, very workable. The big problem is in your grand final, you could just be up against the wall going, I've only got Hawks or Taipans that I could be trading in. 2 opposite ends of the ladder spectrum as well. So some doubts and qualms that could be sort of in your mind about who's actually going to be fronting up that final week, which is going to be pretty interesting. But yeah, you got to work around basically having as many doubles as you can over the next 2 weeks with limited teams on the doubles. So it's a bit tricky.
Yeah, it is hard. Do you focus on the win this week or do you focus on next week? It's really tough to figure out where you sort of sit. Boydie, you suggested maybe just trying to win this week and get through.
Well, yeah, if you're in finals, I mean, you have to. So, all focus is on this week. Hopefully you've sort of thought ahead. And, like myself, and I've got a couple of those Cairns guys sitting on the bench, although I noticed that they're in the traded outs a little bit as well. I'm not on this list. I think I was looking in the top 5% on the SuperCoach Plus, which was weird to me that people would be trading those Cairns guys out unless you absolutely need the cash and you've got the trades there next week to bring them back in, reverse it straight away for a Cotton or Hurt, whatever. But
well, speaking of Cairns, our hot list this week is made up of solely Cairns and Adelaide players. Kendrick Davis, 105, Sam Wardenberg, your guy, JC, 90. Montrezl Harrell, no surprises there, he's on 87. Isaac Humphries and Pedro Bradshaw. Pedro Bradshaw was crazy. He went off this weekend, which was awesome for him. And then in the not list, Taron Armstrong, no surprises there with the DMP. Lockie Ulbrich, Almanza, Trey Kell and Sam Froling. We spoke last week about Illawarra Hawks people getting off the Illawarra Hawks, but they're also all in the not list, JC. Interesting there.
Well, it was kind of like a strange week for the Hawks, wasn't it? It was like just a weird game, and like you're sort of seeing like weird minute fluctuations, I think, more than anything for that Hawks team at the moment, as they're sort of trying to balance out a little bit of rest, a little bit of like, lessons to be learned as well as they sort of hit this stretch run. And it doesn't really surprise me that the SuperCoach scores were a little bit depressed for them this week. It's more about keeping an eye on next week for me with the Hawks, because I think that's going to be when the rubber hits the road and you're like, oh God, are they going to be playing Trey Kell? Are they going to be playing Harvey? Are they going to be playing Froling? So that's kind of the big question for me with the Hawks.
I guess some people are getting scared by it. Like Sam Froling had a 17 on the single last week. I remember rightly before last round, Wardenberg had a 17 on the single, right? And now he's pumped out a 90, right? So sometimes you've got to back these guys in. Look, I think Froling and Cal, as long as there's games that are important to Hawks, they're going to be playing plenty of minutes. There's a FIBA window coming up, in that final section where teams will get a week's rest pretty much, unless they're playing for the Boomers, but they probably won't play the Boomers if they're in finals, obviously, like Sam Froling, etc. I think you've just got to think that those guys will play plenty of minutes if there's games on the line that they need to win to secure that top 2 spot or first spot. So that's all we can think now.
Humphries is an interesting name as well on that of the hot list, because again, we talked about like that Adelaide matchup. So if you want to pod, Humphries is a very interesting name. Brisbane, no centres, and obviously Sam give up plenty of points to the big men too. So I don't know, if you want to say, you can almost probably play Trez and Hump at the same time, I reckon, and sort of like maybe roll the dice there.
We haven't been able to do a shout out to for the last few weeks, just with the strange timing of rounds. We're back to the Thursday, Sunday, which is exciting, which means there's a shout out too. So hopefully you're on here. Boydie, I was looking for your name this week. Ball Me Blazer for Nick, 645. Nothing But String for Clint, 630. Barrett's Ballers for Will, 625. Flynn's United for Flynn on 622. And Lasso's Lads for Jack on 619. Shout out to you guys. I know we had a couple of 700s a few weeks ago. I think Mick Randall was very, very excited about that one. So shout out to Mick. I know that he was upset that we didn't give him a shout out. But some incredible scores there. And I'm very happy to have shout out to back, because like I said, I was hoping one of our names was going to be on there, but we've only got one more week. Maybe it's you, Boydie. To our most traded in and out, which we touched on before, Bryce Cotton, Matt Hurt, obviously heading up those ones. No surprises there. 15.8% of teams trading in Bryce Cotton, 12.6% of teams trading in Matt Hurt. For me, that is painful to see because I have never been able to afford them in the last few weeks. And Boydie, I spoke to you off air about the challenges that I've had with cash flow and then learning throughout this season around how important having cash towards the back end of the season has been. So that's a learning for me next year when I'm not the rookie. Keanu Pinder on the most traded in, which always blows my mind. Sam Wardenberg, Pedro Bradshaw, who we've touched on. Boydie, Keanu.
Well, he had a good game, I guess. So everyone's going to play that schedule game with him now. He's on the cheaper side. I guess if you can't afford Bryce, you might have to go Pinder. And especially, I think they're saying Windler might be back this week. JR said that yesterday or the day before. So, I mean, people might not know that news as yet, so they might be going there. But yeah, it's a little bit of a weird one. He's been so hot and cold. I don't think you can trust him this week, unless you're absolutely loaded and you can just, bring him in as a real risky, bisky type style. The interesting ones for me there are Wardenberg and Bradshaw, both Cairns guys on the trade-in list. They've obviously got a single this week, but the double next week. But bringing those guys in this week suggests to me that there's quite a few teams that are absolutely loaded for this round. They might have all their doubles on starters on doubles, which is a bit scary. I'm in a similar spot once I've got Cotton and Hurt in the side, but still, the teams are loading up with these guys now is a little bit of a worry.
Yeah, if you've got those doubles sort of set, right? Like being on a move from Wardenberg to somebody else, like Hurt or something, like that is just awesome, and you should be laughing. Like the traded in, like Wardenberg being in the ins, it's like, okay, I'll keep him for next week. Like that's just so nice. To be in that position would be lovely. But I think, like you hit on Pinder, I think this is a massive question. That price point for him is like $277 at the moment. We've talked about this time and time again on the show. Like the Pinder roller coaster is just, it's almost too much emotional baggage for me at this point for me to go back to the Pinder train. But you've got Pinder and Doolittle with Windler sitting there as well. Like suddenly that Perth front court gets really, really, really crowded again. And it sort of feels like, I don't know if any of them are going to be great options. Like maybe Doolittle, I feel like he's got a higher ceiling sometimes. But I know the price difference is going to play a pretty big role. So I'm looking down this barrel of like, I could bring in Bryce and Pinder this week.
Oof.
And I just don't want to. I just don't want to. I love you, Keanu, but geez, like, come on, I'm just going to lay on my back and start shooting in the air like Keanu for real in like Point Break, but like just firing emotional bullets. But it's this really strange setup. If Windler does come back, I'm probably going to stay clear. If he's still out, you might want to roll the dice, Boydie.
Maybe. I mean, everyone's forgetting that they had a double overtime game this round as well. So their points, their SuperCoach points, is probably a little bit inflated, including that Pinder score. So I'd bear that in mind. I mean, I'm bringing Bryce in because you're not doubting Bryce, but the other guys, I've already got Doolittle, so he'll probably start for me. But there's a little bit of risk in that as well. I don't think he even got 30 in that double overtime game. So especially if Windler's back as well, because Windler was probably that more informed player before he had that terrible eye injury. So it's, Perth are a bit scary for me.
They are.
No shocks probably on the out, I don't think. Casey Prather, 12.7% of teams got rid of him. Parker Jackson-Cartwright with that rib abdominal injury. Sam Menenga, Josh Bannon, Xavier Cooks. Boydie, you said in a world there is a possibility where you might keep a Xavier Cooks because on a single he might score well.
Yep.
Are you surprised to see him on the out list, or are you? It's pretty normal for you?
Yes and no. I mean, a couple of those guys. Casey Prather's been punching out big numbers as well. I know he had maybe a down week with due to that injury, etc. But yeah, Cooks could sit there, but I mean, he's so much, 308, just under 380k. So if you're trying to get a Hurt, you can swap him straight for a Matt Hurt, then you're doing it if you need that starter on a double position. If you're in that luxury where you could keep him on the bench, he's one of those guys that can punch out a 60, so, do you keep him there? But then who knows what's going on with that Kings roster and minutes and what's going on and who plays what this week and what next week, who knows? So still a little bit scary.
Yeah, it's the one name where you look at like the most traded out where you go, oh, maybe you could keep him just because he can still have like those huge scores. Whereas everybody else on a single, you're probably moving off them. Prather, PJC being injured, like that's a straight out. Like that's probably most people just jumping off point to get back to Bryce. Even though it's a pretty big jump because Bryce just costs an arm and a leg, but he's worth it. So none of those are massive surprises. Like Cook's obviously at that price point as well. Makes it a lot easier to sort of move to who you want to.
Yep.
But I think that's one thing to sort of keep in mind as well. Like you can't get too bent out of shape if you've got someone in a single. Like just make sure that you're sort of strategically using the player that you think will actually still give you a decent score on single. It's not the end of the world, but yeah, you just basically, if you're running out of trades or you don't have enough doubles on court or on your bench, you can't really cry too much about it. Just make sure you do the right trade.
We're at the end of the podcast, but I want to ask one question about pods in just a second. Reminder to go to supercoach.com.au for all of your Supercoach needs, for your trades, everything like that. The NBL app as well has live scores, which you can refresh and utilize. Also, the ladder predictor, I want to give a little shout out there. That's a really fun thing that we're doing at the moment. I am sitting on there most days trying to figure out who's where, who's ending up in the standings at the end of my rounds, but supercoach.com.au for all of your Supercoach needs as always. Okay, guys, if you are playing in a final, you've got most of your roster set, but you need something, a little bit of a point of difference, a little bit of someone to spice it up. JC, anyone on your mind?
Well, I'm sneakily jumping on and having a look who the other player has got and who they don't have.
Nice.
And basically going, right, well, there's the gap in the market. I'm going to jump on who they don't have, right? Because when you've only got 5 starters, that bench sort of, if you can sort of maneuver the bench around, there is a name like this week specifically, Nathan Sobey. Like we've sort of seen him go absolutely hammer and tongs. He had 32 last week. He ripped off 89 and 81 the previous 2 rounds when they had the doubles, right? So Sobes is another player on a single where you could probably back him in. Like if you are worried about burning a trade now, getting Sobey in for this week's double, and then you were stuck with him for a single. Again, he's proven that he can rip off a really, really big score, like on a single. So Sobes is probably it's not exactly a point of difference, but it's probably a name that not as many people have got when you've got KD, when you've got Bryce. And you've got the Cairns dudes as well. Not to step on yours, Boydie, I don't know, but like Rob Edwards, for something like that, is probably an interesting pod for round 20. So, but 19, probably Sobes.
I'd probably say Humph, I guess, with that Brisbane depleted big man roster, lineup. Does he come in and have another 80? Because I think he's fairly well under-owned. Sorry. So you can, if you've got your Supercoach Plus, you can obviously have a look at the ownership rankings. The other one was Sobey, I was going to mention. One that is completely off the back page. I've got no chance. I don't think this is going to happen. But Tassie need to win. So I think Milton Doyle or Crawford could be real risky bisky sort of if you really want to just take an absolute punt, but I'm not saying you should do this at all.
No, it's a name.
Milton had 26 last week, and in his last 2 doubles it was 71 and a 54. So like the scoring is there.
He can do it. He can do everything.
Very little else.
Yep.
Yes.
And they need to win.
And it's Tassie at home. They do need to win. If they don't win, Southeast Melbourne clinch finals. It is a really big game on that Thursday night. Yep, they're playing Illawarra, so a huge one. But I like that. It is a little bit different. It's a little bit out of the box, but I like it.
And they got a bit of a rev up from D-Ruck as well, I think, in an article as well, saying just blow up the roster. So they're playing for a bit of pride almost.
Geordie Hunt is also one that sort of slightly under the radar. He's only like 202k, so it's sort of like a bit of a dart throw. I think with their 2 games, they have Perth and then Adelaide. So that Geordie, he doesn't have like a giant ceiling, but his floor is also quite high. So it's not going to be like, Sam Menenga has like these huge dips and
single figure,
and then whereas Geordie just sort of always delivers. So I don't know if you've sort of found yourself stuck at a weird price point, you've only got 205k. He's not a bad option, I think.
I love it, guys. Thank you so much again for your time. I do want to give Boydie a shout out because both you and I, JC, were shocked when you told us that you have a boost left, which is absolutely wild in round 19. Yep. You're going to utilise it this week?
Not this week. I'm loaded this week with starters, so it'll be next week when the schedule swings around. That's where I aim to be next year in my Supercoach world, having a boost at the end of the season. For you guys listening at home, thanks again for joining us. Our experts have been amazing. Some point of difference there. We absolutely love having you with us, and all the best for your finals if you're competing. It's a must-win week, like I said, and stay tuned for everything on supercoach.com.au and tune into the NBL this week.